introduction and for the invitation. And well, I will use so I will be writing my slides. It's the first time that I use this device, so I hope I don't make any big mistake. And so I will tell you during my two lectures a lot of things. So first I will tell you about quantum hacking. Although I must say I don't work on quantum hacking. Usually people who work on quantum hacking are experimental physicists, engineers. I'm a theoretical physicist. But I know some things. I was reading before coming here, so I will tell you all the basic ideas about quantum hacking. And then this would be useful for me to introduce the second topic, which is the topic of device-independent QKD, which is a development of the standard quantity distribution that I believe Renato Renner explained during his lecture. Actually, I was talking to some of my people here, and I have some people from my group are in the audience, and they told me that Renato mostly explained the Acìn protocol for the quantity distribution. So in my case, I will mostly focus on the BB84 protocol, just for me to be sure that you follow me. So in the BB84 protocol, what you have the standard alias, there is Bob. So you remember in the Acìn protocol, probably what Renato explained was that there is a source here that sends quantum particles to the devices, and the devices will make some measurements. Okay, but in the BB84, it's slightly different, although it's in the standard QKD scenario, it's basically it offers the same level of security. So you have BB84. So what Alice does, she prepares some quantum particles that live in a hyperspace of dimension 2. So she picks up some states from a hyperspace of dimension 2. And the encoding that she's going to use is given by this. So this is the block sphere with my drawing. And okay, here you have two axes, let's say X and Z. So she can prepare the quantum particle with the spin pointing into the plus Z direction, or plus X direction, or minus Z direction, and minus X direction. This particle is sent to Bob, and on Bob's side, he's going to measure, say, the spin or the polarization of this particle along the same directions. Okay, so what happens here then is that Alice prepares qubits that are sent to Bob, and these qubits are measured by Bob. Very good. So this is the scenario. So in the protocol, you define the states that are being prepared by Alice. So you have this state, this state, this state, this state, and you define the measurements that Bob is going to perform. You have the measurement on the Z direction and the measurement on the X direction. Okay, I forgot to say, I was told that the background here is very diverse, so you should interrupt me anytime, but I hope this is more or less clear to everyone. Okay, so this is just, if not, it's not such a big thing, okay? So what the important thing is that there are quantum particles that are prepared in a given Hilbert space that go from Alice to Bob. And Bob makes some measurements here on these quantum particles. So this is the definition of the protocol. So this is the BB84 protocol. And then people came up with security proofs. So in the security proof, basically what they tell you is that if some conditions are met, then the protocol is secure. So it allows Alice and Bob to establish a secure key that can later be used for cryptography. And this is a mathematical security proof. So there is here some mathematics that takes these objects living in this Hilbert space, it makes some, it applies some machinery, and it proves that the protocol is secure. So there is an eavesdropper who is somewhere here. So the eavesdropper tries to read the information that is being sent from Alice to Bob, and you can see that the knowledge that she gets is limited, and this can be used to make a key. Okay. Very good. So this is very nice, and as you may have read, okay. So you may have read. Sometimes people were saying like quantum key distribution is unbreakable and it offers an additional security. But actually, as we will see, and this is one of the main things or one of the main messages I want to give you is that this is not always the case. Okay? So I will tell you about the first, and the problem comes from the following fact. Okay? So as we were discussing, there is the security proof, but now you go to the lab. Okay, so this is where me or a computer scientist or a theoretical physicist or mathematicians work. Okay, so we have the mathematical security proof. But now you want to implement this very nice idea, and you go to the lab, and well, there are even companies that sell QKD products, and now you say, okay, let's run this protocol. Okay, so the only thing you have to do, as you could see here, you have to prepare these states, and Bob has to make this measurement. So you have to give some devices to Alice that allows her to prepare this quantum state, and to Bob to make these quantum measurements. So you talk to the experimental physicists or to the people in the company, and they tell you, what do you need? And you say, I need a source of qubits. And then the company may tell you, well, this is not so easy to construct. So what happens if we use a laser source, which is light, which is very good to travel, and since you want something quantum, what we do, we attenuate this laser source. So we attenuate at the level that is comparable to single photons. Okay? And you say, okay, let's try to do that. And what does Bob need to do? And then you said, well, he needs to implement some measurements. And then the experimentalist or the guy who's implementing the setup tells you, okay, we will use some single photon detectors for that we have in the lab. And you say, okay, let's do it. Okay, so this is now let's say, the implementation level. Okay, so these are these. This is a P. Okay, and so when you have the implementation level, then, I mean, usually when people, a very standard solution is that Alice now has a laser, and she encodes the information on the polarization of the light produced by the laser. And this laser is sent here, and Bob has a single photon detector. So it's not exactly the same as you demanded for the theory. So now I will tell you about the first attack that was proposed for these implementations, which is called the photon number splitting attack. This attack was never implemented, it's just an idea that some people came up, which shows that when you want to implement the idea, if you make some of the things like what is happening here, like you make realistic devices, then you may have some problems. So as I was telling you, the preparation of the light, of the qubits, is made by a laser, which is attenuated. And well, you don't need to know much, but a laser in quantum physics is described by something called a coherent state, which is some coherent superposition of a state with 0 photons, with 1 photon, with 2 photons, with 3 photons, and so on and so on. Okay, so and what happens here is that the laser is very attenuated, this alpha n satisfy these conditions, and actually the gap between this is quite big. Okay, so alpha 0 is much larger than alpha 1, which is in turn is much larger than alpha 2, and so on and so on. Okay. So what happens when you encode information on this coherent state is that most of the time you send 0 photons. Sometimes you send 1 photon, and even more rarely you send 2 photons. Okay, this is what Alice uses to encode information for Bob. Oh, sorry. Okay. So it's not the ideal qubit, because sometimes you send, let's say, 1 particle, but sometimes you send 2, and sometimes you send 0. So the idea that people had was, okay, when we send 0 particles, well, nothing happens. I mean, Bob won't observe any click, that's okay. But most of the times we are sending just 1 particle, 1 photon, and that's okay. So this somehow approximates what is a single photon source. Okay, but now you do this in reality as well, and what happens apart from this device is that there is a fiber connecting the 2 parties. Okay, so this is a fiber, or just a channel, and in this channel there are always losses. Okay, so these are the ingredients of your implementation. So the eavesdropper knows that you are preparing things with a laser, that there is a detection of light here, and there is a channel that has losses, and you expect the channel to be lossy. I mean, every channel has losses. Okay, so here's the idea of the attack. So what the eavesdropper does, attack. So Eve measures the number of photons in the pulse. So usually measuring the number of photons is measuring the quantum state that goes from Alice to Bob is a bad idea. But here you are measuring the number of photons, and you are not encoding information on the number of photons. Okay, you're encoding information on polarization or another degree of freedom of light, but not on the number of photons. So Eve can do this, and you don't notice anything. Now, if the number is 0, well, she does nothing. It doesn't really matter because, I mean, this is not a problem. So if there is 1 photon, okay, she blocks. So she doesn't forward the light to Bob. Okay? And if she sees 2 photons, she keeps 1. And she sends the second through an ideal channel. I mean, she's super Eve, okay, so she can do whatever she wants. So you can think, for instance, that she has prepared in advance some maximum entangled state of 2 qubits between Alice and Bob, and she perfectly teleports this second photon from Alice to Bob. So for sure, Bob will detect this photon, okay, because this photon is not affected by channel losses. Again, Eve can do, I mean, we don't want to make any condition on what she can do. She can do whatever that is allowed by physics. So what happens here then is that she keeps 1 photon, so she waits until the basis reconciliation, then she knows the basis that was used by, okay, sorry, I didn't say this, I was assuming. Okay, so let me just come back because I don't know if that was explained during the lectures. So the reason why QBT4 is secure is because Alice and Bob used 2 bases for encoding, Z and X. So when Eve wants to measure here, she doesn't know whether she has to measure in Z or X basis. Okay, but later during the protocol, the basis is announced. So what Eve can do, she keeps 1 photon on her quantum memory. She waits until the basis is announced, then she measures her photon and she reads the information. Okay, so I hope it is clear. So she gets information. So this is because somehow, by accident, the source prepared a perfect copy of the quantum information that you wanted to send. Okay? This is all the cases where the source prepared 2 photons, and Eve can detect that. Now, when does this protocol, this attack work? Well, for that you need, of course, what you see here, that Eve, she blocks the photons, okay, sometimes. So you may say that, okay, she's introducing more losses. So Alice and Bob, they are expecting a given amount of losses, but Eve is blocking some of the losses, so they will see that the losses increase. But at the same time, sometimes she's forwarding 1 photon with her ideal channel. Okay? So if you take all these numbers into account, you can see that whenever the probability of seeing 2 photons is comparable to the losses in the channel, then the protocol works. Well, I'm not sure if this is the exact quantity, okay? But here the message is that whenever Eve can mimic the channel losses with all the 2 photon states, then you don't see any difference, okay? Because Eve is blocking all 0 and 1 photons, and she's taking all those photon states, she's forwarding from Alice to Bob the photon with no losses. So whenever the 2 photon states allow her to mimic the channel losses, then you see the losses. Alice and Bob see the losses they expect to see. They think that the protocol is secure, but it's not, because Eve can keep a perfect copy of the information, wait until the basis is announced, and then read the information. Okay, so this is a problem, and this is a problem because it works, I mean, okay, you need some channel losses for this protocol to work, but it's already a problem for channel losses of around tens of kilometers. Okay, so it was a real problem. So this attack was never implemented because for that you need Eve to measure the photon, the number of photons in the pulse, and this is something very difficult that realistic Eve cannot do today. But in QKD we don't want to reason like putting assumptions on what Eve can do. Okay, so it's potentially a problem, and this is why people somehow abandon the standard implementation of QBT4, and they consider another solution that I'm not going to explain, which is the decoy state, which is a solution that solves Okay. So again, I hope you understand the idea of the attack and why it works. So basically it explores two things. That there are losses between Alice and Bob, and there will always be. And that the preparation by Alice is given by this attenuated laser source, which is, you believe that is a good approximation to a single photon source, which is what you would like to use, but it's not the same. So from time to time, the source produces two photon pulses, so the source accidentally produces a copy of the quantum information you want to transmit. Okay, this is not in contradiction with any quantum cloning theorem, it's just the source that does it for you. Okay. Very good. So, well, that was the photon number splitting attack, and theories then, and it was a theoretical attack, and then theories found a solution, which is the decoy state that I didn't explain you. So somehow they kept using quantum field distribution and making experimental demonstration, and there were commercial devices. And then some years ago, there were some successful hacking attacks on protocols that broke the implementation. Okay, that was, I mean, someone who was very active on that was, for instance, Vadim Makarov. And so now I will try to explain you how come these people were able to hack standard QKD, even if they were using what I say here, this decoy state solution that was solving the previous photon number splitting attack. Okay. So actually what these people did, if I'm not mistaken, they went to the company selling quantum key distribution prototypes, they bought one of these devices, and they somehow opened the box and they were playing with it, understanding how it was working. So they were making some sort of reverse engineering, and from this they had a good understanding of the device, and they used this good understanding to hack the device. Okay, so here's the idea of the attack. And this is not my specialty, but I will try to explain it later. Okay? So again, now let's forget about the source. Let's assume that we even have a single photon source that produces the qubits that go from Alice to Bob. So now, before the photon number splitting attack was using some problems at the source, but now we believe that Alice is doing a good job. There is a method that is well suited for the use of attenuated laser sources, so Alice is okay. But now we look at Bob. And basically the attack exploits problems on the detector. Okay? So they say, these are Alice is producing some states of light, okay, with some photons. Let's assume that she has a single photon source, so she's producing a single photon, and she encodes information on, say, polarization. What I'm going to say is also works for other information encodings, but I'm going to use polarization. So this goes to Bob, information on some polarization, and then on both sides there is something called, okay, Bob applies some unitaries, but at the end there is what is called a polarized mean splitter. Okay, so this is P. Polarized mean splitter. So polarized mean splitter is a mirror who lets light of a given polarization be transmitted and reflects light of the orthogonal polarization. Okay, so the light comes here, and the light might be reflected or transmitted. And here there are some detectors. Okay. So I will repeat what's the idea of the BBT4. The idea of BBT4 is that Alice will encode some information on these four states. So for instance, for simplicity, I will assume that Alice encodes information on the plus Z. And what you expect is that whenever Bob measures in the Z basis, he will read the information perfectly. Okay, so we will get a click and you will see, oh, Alice encoded a 0. Okay, so this is the encode some information. Okay, so now let's see what's the idea of the protocol. So let's imagine that now, let's imagine the simplest attack that was invented, which is an intercepted resend. This is an attack that doesn't work, but we will make it work. So what it does, she takes the qubit and she measures the qubit. But of course, she doesn't know whether it was measured on the Z or X basis. Okay, let's say she measures on the X. Okay. If you measure a quantum particle that is in the Z state and you measure on the x basis, then you may get result plus x and minus x with probability 1/2. Well, maybe this is too basic, I don't know how much you know about quantum physics, okay, but this can be proven. And what Eve now can do, she can prepare a state that is compatible with the result she observed. Let's say she got plus x, and then she prepares the qubit with pointing into the plus x direction. Okay? Now what happens is that when this qubit that is pointing in the plus x direction goes to Bob, now she can get result 0 with probability 1/2, but he can also get result 1 minus that with probability 1/2 because the qubit is around the direction x instead of being in the direction plus x. So this introduces errors on Alice and Bob. Alice and Bob can see these errors, and the protocol fails. Okay? So how can Eve make this protocol work? Okay, let me just, before doing that, so let's assume now a different situation. Okay, let's assume that. Okay, so let me just explain it in another way. So the problem with this is that the measurement by Eve does not commute with the measurement by Bob because Eve is making a different measurement from Bob. Okay, and the fact that these measurements are non-orthogonal, okay, well, I mean they don't commute, makes that Eve measurement introduces a perturbation on Bob measurement. So this is why this attack doesn't work. But now let's go to this doesn't work in theory. Okay, but now let's go to the implementation. So again, what happens in the implementation is there are losses here. Okay, so now Eve is going to exploit these losses. And Eve is going to exploit also her knowledge on the detector. So let me now look at the detector and how it works. So again, I'm not an expert on these things, but I read about what the hackers used. So basically, they studied the detector that is placed in the device. So what you can see is that the detector has two behaviors depending. It's a device, a box, and you apply some voltage to this box, and there is a critical value of this voltage. And you want this detector to detect single photons. And for that to happen, the detector has to work in this range. Okay? So what happens here is that you have the mode that is called Geiger, but basically you can detect single photons here. So what happens is that if the detector is working here, then when the photon arrives, the photon creates an electron hole pair, and this is amplified, then you have a current, and you are pretty sure that the photon arrived. Okay, so this is where Bob expects his detector to work. However, there is a range here where the detector has a completely different functioning. Okay, so what happens here is the detector is in what is called the linear regime. So basically, here the detector, we can take it like the detector clicks if you create a current here that is larger than a given threshold. So if the intensity of the light is larger than a given threshold, then the detector clicks. If not, it doesn't click. Okay, so here is related to the intensity, while here is just a single photon produces the process. So here I would say it's more a classical detector that is just proportional to the light intensity. So this is where the detector in the standard, in the good device works. But what the hackers did, they managed to make the detector work in this regime. And the way they did that was because, okay, here's what I cannot tell you with details. So I think it's more on the physical side of the detection process. So they saw that by injecting a continuous wave with a given intensity, they could make the detector work in this regime. But of course, Bob did not notice anything. Okay, so just he was working, but the detector instead of working here, I mean, of course, Bob has to somehow open the door to get the light going into the detector, and this is the moment where Eve introduces a light pulse that makes the detector to work in this regime. Okay. So now it's more or less the same as we had before, but the only difference is that Eve forced the detector to work in this regime, where the fact of having a click is just given by whether the light intensity is larger than the given threshold or not. Okay, so it's the same as I had before, remember? So there was a preparation by Alice, there was the measurement by Bob, but now this detector works in this linear regime instead of working in the single photon detection regime. Okay, so I come back, there's a particle that is produced, and now Eve again takes the particle, and she measures in one basis, say again X. And she prepares a state pointing in one of the results, say plus X. So as I told you before, the problem with the ideal solution for E is that her measurement interferes with the statistics that Alice and Bob see, because a measurement on the X direction does not commute with a measurement on the Z direction. So now what Eve will try to do is the following. So if Bob applies the same measurement as Eve, he will get a clip. But if Bob applies this measurement, X, as Eve, well, they are applying the same measurement, so clearly they commute. So in these cases, Eve does not introduce any error, and Alice above cannot see that she's acting on the photons. And if Bob measures in the different bases, Eve will try Bob not to get. Okay, so I hope it is clear that if Bob only gets clicks when he implements the same measurement as Eve, clearly the two measurements commute. I mean, Eve is not introducing any error in the process, and she's not detected. And actually, Eve knows what's the result that Bob is going to get, because she prepared the state pointing plus X. So she knows that if Bob measures in the X direction, he's going to get the result plus 1. Okay? Of course, she doesn't know what is going to happen on the Z, but she's going to force the detector not to click in this situation. And the way she does this is because she has placed the detector in this linear regime. So what she does then, she prepares a state with light, and she does it with an intensity that is, say, 1.5 threshold. Classical pulse. So now it's not a it's just classical light with a given intensity. And this is in the X direction, plus X direction. So now let's see what happens on Bob. So if Bob measures in the X direction, so somehow this polarized beam splitter is in the X direction, it means that if the pulse has polarization minus X, it will come here with certainty, because Bob is measuring in the same direction as Eve. And if the light is in the plus X direction, the light pulse will be transmitted. Okay? So the pulse arrives from Eve, Bob measures X as what Eve measured and prepared, and now the pulse is transmitted, and it's above the threshold because, okay, this was I threshold. Okay? So it's above the threshold, so Bob gets a click. And Eve knows that Bob gets a click, and also she knows the result that he's going to get, because she prepared this information on the plus X. So he knows that the light pulse will be transmitted and will be detected here, and then will Bob say, I got plus X. Now, what happens if now Bob decides to put this polarized beam splitter so that measures Z? Okay, since it's a classical pulse, then what happens is that the intensity is divided. This is what classical lights do with mirrors. Okay, the intensity is divided between the two arms, and actually it's divided in half. So here you have I over 2 and I over 2. Simply because now the direction of measurement is not the same. Okay, so half of the pulse is transmitted, half of the pulse is reflected. So now the two detectors, the intensity is, well, I say that I was 1.5 threshold, so it's 0.75 threshold. Okay, so no detector clicks. But if you think that this is due to the losses, you will see that half of the pulses are lost, but these are losses that are equal to 3 dBs, and this is something that happens as soon as you have 3 dBs, I think maybe 20 kilometers, I don't remember now the number, but it's something that it's a very standard distance. Okay, so this is why they could do it, okay, because they play with the detector, they made it work here, then it was working in this linear regime, and then they arranged the pulses so that when the bases between Bob and Eve were the same, there was a click, and when the bases were different, there was no click. And now, what is happening basically is that Eve can produce perfectly what Bob is getting, and then there's no security at all. Okay, so that was an attack, and they were showing it, okay? I must say that, to my knowledge, there has been no attack in a, say, realistic configuration. So I think the hackers went, they bought a device, and then they demonstrated with the devices they had bought how they could force the result by Bob. So they were injecting light from the outside, and you could see, okay, now the detector, the Bob is going to measure a 0, now Bob is going to measure a 1, and so on and so on. They could do that. But they never went to a device that was not in their hands, and they hacked the device. Okay, so it was never. So they bought this device and they played with it, and then they could demonstrate for you how they could hack it. This is to my understanding. But anyway, it was an attack, showing a problem with this. So then, well, of course, that was a problem. So they were in collaboration with the company, and they designed some measures for that. So for instance, a measure that you can do, you can try to monitor the intensity that you receive through the Bob can monitor the intensity, okay? Because, as I said, to make this change, the detector from being here to go there, you have to inject some light, okay? So you see that some light is coming that were not expected, and then you see that something suspicious is happening in the implementation, and you can stop that. But of course, this complicates the device, and well, this is just one possibility among many, okay? And in fact, in the past years, there have been several attacks showing that why you can have this problem. So for instance, I can give you one more just to tell you that there are many possibilities, but this is just something that is called the wavelet attack. Okay, so what happens also sometimes, no, sorry, I will tell you something that is called the Trojan horse attack. And this is based on the fact that sometimes, I mean, okay, imagine that you have Alice again, and she encodes information. So it has here a device that encodes information. So what Eve can do, she can inject some light here, and sometimes in the devices there are elements that reflect some of the light. So you inject the information, and there are some devices, some couplings, and things that are not perfect. So what happens is that if you inject a lot of light, there's a small portion of the light that gets reflected and comes back. And with this, Eve can have access to some information that was used by Alice for the encoding, and she can read information. This is like Trojan horse because some of the enemy is inside you. And that was, I think, the motivation for the name. Okay. So with this, I will conclude. You said was how much time do you have? Okay, so but I think I will conclude because then I will move to the second topic. So what I want to do is that, what I want to say now is that, okay, I want you to understand two things, okay? First is that the attacks never work at the theory level, okay? I mean, in the probability for Ecke, I mean, Renato explained a security proof. This is a mathematical security proof, so there are two ways we can hack it. Either we're proving that the mathematical proof is wrong, or by proving that some of the assumptions were wrong. And one of the assumptions is that quantum physics is correct. So, this is not what hackers do, okay? What hackers do, they go to the implementation and they see that there are some gaps between what the theory demands for security and what the implementation does. Okay, so for instance, in this particular case, so what was happening is that first the channel was lossy, and this is why it could force some no clicks on Bob's detection whenever they were not convenient for her. And also you play with the fact that this is a very complex object. Okay, so usually you assume that this is a measurement on a spin 1/2 particle. This is what the security proof assumes. But this is just a detector that works in a much more complex way with these two regimes, and you can modify this. Okay, so there is a gap between the theory of your devices where you put security and what happens in reality. Okay, this is some of what the hackers use. So the moral of all that is that, okay, there are two possibilities. Okay? One possibility is like, you guarantee that what your implementation does is exactly what you model. Okay, but I think this is a very difficult and even, I would say, fundamental question. Like, when you make a security proof, often you write your starting point of the security proof is like, okay, I have states living in a Hilbert space of dimension 2. Okay, let's say. Well, how do you know that when you go to a lab and you prepare a particle, it lives in a Hilbert space of dimension 2? Okay, I think this is, and how can you certify this? I mean, when you go to the provider, no, it comes to you and you say, oh, I have heard something about quantity distribution, I want to buy it, and then the provider will give you a box. Yes, okay, here's the quantity distribution protocol, and you can say, oh, thank you very much. And how do I know that this is secure? And the provider will tell you, because I tell you that it's secure and it's quantum. And then you will say, okay, but I heard that I have to prepare qubits. And then the provider will tell you, yes, I can certify that it's preparing qubits. But how can you certify that something lives in a Hilbert space of dimension 2? I mean, you can consider many possibilities. For instance, I don't know if this is possible in maybe yes, but imagine that when you encode on polarization on the basis, there is a very small accidental encoding of your polarization with frequency. So when you encode in a given basis, say Z, you are sending a photon on a given frequency, and when you encode in the second basis, X, you are sending a photon on a different frequency. But it's so small that you don't notice that. But of course, the eavesdropper has much more power than you, so the eavesdropper is waiting and seeing the photon pulses that come from your lab, and she monitors the frequency and she sees this small difference, and then she can read the information. So how can you even certify that this is not happening? Okay, so I think there are two messages again. There is one, which is make sure that your implementation matches as much as possible the theory you need to prove security. The second, certify that it is happening. And in some cases, some of the assumptions you need for security are very difficult to certify. So at the moment, I don't have any idea about how to certify that something is security. So you have any? I would like to hear what you have to say. Okay? And the last thing I will say about this is that you can see that the hacking attacks, there are two different types of hacking attacks. So there is one hacking attack where, for instance, let's assume you have a detector, no? You have two detectors, and well, I know that for some reason, when one detector clicks, there is the temperature of your devices rises by some degrees, and when the other clicks, it stays with a given value, whatever, okay? Well, this is an imperfection that I consider as an information leakage. Okay, but what is happening here is that from the outside, if I'm able to monitor the temperature, I will see which detector clicked. So this is an attack where it's like you will be announcing to the world that your measurement output. Well, there is no solution for that, but this is well, the only solution is that you make sure that this is not happening. Okay, but this is an information leakage problem that, in my view, has nothing to do with which solution you implement for cryptography. Also, in standard computational-based cryptography, you have to store your information on a given device. And if you do it in a way that is insecure, that it broadcasts the information, then this is a problem. Okay, so these are not the type of hacking attacks I'm going to consider, which are very relevant, but I'm not going to consider them because I think here quantumness is more or less on the same level as any other possible solution. So if you cannot store your information in a secure way, this is an information leakage problem. Okay, so what I'm going to consider are attacks like the ones I was telling you, like where you force the protocol to work in a different way without being noticed. Okay, and so with this I will stop by my first part. So there was somehow motivation for the second part, which is the issue of device-independent QKD. So in device-independent QKD, you try to design ways of avoiding all these hacking attacks I was telling you about. So not the ones about you store information in a bad way, okay? The ones where the eavesdropper plays with imperfections of your devices, meaning that your devices do not meet what the theory demands, okay? And this device-independent QKD distribution is also useful for this certification problem I was telling you about as well. So like the fact that you go to a provider and you get a box, and then you put a lot of trust in your provider that this box is running the QKD protocol it's supposed to do. Okay. For this, I think I stop now for the first part. I don't know how it was now. I should get questions or.
Maybe since we started a bit later, there is time for 1 or 2 short questions. If not, then we can go for a break and resume in 20 minutes or so. Okay, that's 10 to